welcome back to another explainer. Today, we are jumping straight into what experts call the absolute Mount Everest of engineering, the Gothard Base Tunnel. I want you to picture a completely high-stakes, almost unbelievable battle. On one side, you have human ingenuity armed with complex math and thousands of tons of steel, and on the other side, the Swiss Alps, literally one of the most formidable, immovable natural fortresses on the entire planet. We're going to break down exactly how humanity looked at that mountain and decided to conquer it. Section 1. Europe's biggest obstacle. So, to really get why this massive undertaking even happened in the first place, we have to look at the antagonist of our story here. For centuries, the Alps haven't just been some pretty tourist spot for skiing. They've been a massive, dormant wall right smack in the middle of the European map. They completely choked off the continent's most vital trade routes with unpredictable snowstorms and avalanches. Historically, if you wanted to get goods across, you had to navigate these incredibly perilous, slow, zigzagging mountain roads. Trains had to climb steep, winding bridges that took forever. But think about the massive global supply chains we rely on today. The busy factories up in Northern Europe and the huge seaports in the south, they desperately needed each other to keep the economy afloat. This geographic wall was literally choking European trade. The old routes were pushed way past their breaking point. So engineers realized a pretty profound truth. Going over the mountains? Yeah, that just wasn't an option anymore. We had to go straight through them. Which brings us to Section 2. Gothard, an impossible mission. In September 1992, an absolutely audacious project was greenlit. And honestly, it sounded like pure science fiction. A lot of world-renowned experts at the time said it was fundamentally impossible. Let's look at why. First up is the sheer length, 57 kilometers. To put that into everyday perspective, that's roughly the distance from Delhi to Ghaziabad or Lahore to Kasur. But we're not talking about paving a flat highway here. We're talking about carving a perfectly straight tunnel through solid, dense rock. In fact, because the distance was so massively long, the physics involved got totally mind-bending. Engineers literally had to factor in the curvature of the Earth itself just to keep the tunnel properly aligned. And if you think the length is crazy, consider the depth, 2.5 kilometers straight down into the Earth. When you are that deep, you aren't just digging a hole. You are bearing the entire crushing weight of the mountain above you. To visualize that, the rock above this tunnel is equivalent to the height of 3 Burj Khalifas stacked directly on top of each other. Just think about that for a second. The sheer pressure at that depth could crush steel like it's tissue paper. So, to fight that kind of unbelievable mass, you need an absolute monster of a machine. Enter the engineer's ultimate weapon, the tunnel boring machine, affectionately named Sissy. Though, honestly, you would not want to mess with Sissy. She wasn't just a giant drill. She was essentially a moving, underground factory, 450 meters long. That's nearly half a kilometer of pure machinery. Her cutter head alone was taller than a 2-story house, and just turning her on sucked up the same amount of electricity as 20,000 homes. Moving on to Section 3. Nature's deadly challenges. As you can guess, the mountain was absolutely not going to surrender without a fight. As the 2,600 underground workers pushed deeper, the Alps ruthlessly fought back. It was a daily environment of pure terror. The mountain threw 3 deadly weapons at them. Number 1, crushing rock pressure that caused completely unannounced, sudden collapses right from the ceiling. Number 2, boiling heat hitting 50 degrees Celsius or about 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And number 3, hidden explosive underwater reserves pressurized at a staggering 2,900 psi. Global experts were terrified these 3 things would destroy the machines and turn this tunnel into a living tomb. Let's break those down. Deep inside the Earth, the rocks radiate massive amounts of geothermal heat. At 50 degrees Celsius, it was basically an underground oven. Imagine doing grueling physical labor in that. A human being can barely survive 15 or 20 minutes in those conditions before fatal heat stroke kicks in. To keep everyone alive, workers were strictly limited to just 2 or 3 hour shifts, and engineers had to pull off this crazy feat where they pumped massive cooling water pipes from the outside world all the way down just to create a survivable atmosphere before they could even start digging. But then they hit the water. And guys, this wasn't just a little underground puddle. This was water trapped inside mountain cracks under millions of tons of stone, naturally pressurized to 2,900 psi. That is a force so intense, it's like taking the entire weight of a car and balancing it on a 1-inch point. If that water burst out, It would shoot right through solid concrete like a cannonball. So how do you solve that? Well, with pure engineering genius. The team drilled small pipes into the rock face ahead of the main machine. Then they pumped in freezing liquid and just let it run for weeks. This literally froze the explosive high-pressure water into solid ice. Only then could the giant machine safely grind through the icy barrier. I mean, absolutely incredible, right? Section 4, the final wall and success. Overcoming these deadly obstacles was not a quick sprint. It was a grueling 17-year-long war of attrition. Just look at this timeline. The concept was first floated way back in 1940. It took decades to get approval in 92, and digging finally began in 93. Remember the terrifying stakes? Two totally separate teams were digging from opposite sides of the mountain, 57 kilometers apart, completely in the dark. If their complex calculations were off by just 1 single centimeter, the two tunnels would completely miss each other in the center of the mountain, and billions of dollars would be instantly wasted. So the whole world held its breath, leading up to October 15, 2010. On that historic day, the giant cutterhead finally broke through the final wall of rock, connecting both sides. And the margin of error? After 57 kilometers of blind digging through a solid mountain, 0.5 inches. Just half an inch. Guided by GPS, gyroscopes, and lasers, achieving that level of precision is quite literally the equivalent of threading a needle from 50 kilometers away. It was a total triumph. Section 5, the unseen danger of air. Okay, so the rock was beaten, the water was frozen, the tunnels met. Project over, time to celebrate, right? Well, not exactly. Just when they thought they had won the war, they faced a massive plot twist, an invisible, totally destructive aerodynamic danger. You see, when a high-speed train enters a narrow, 57-kilometer-long tube, the air inside has nowhere to go. It gets trapped, instantly compressing and creating these massive explosive shockwaves that travel ahead of the train. If they didn't account for this, the sheer air pressure alone would violently shatter the windows of the passenger trains as they moved through. Luckily, the engineering team saw this terrifying physics problem coming. Their brilliant solution? They didn't just build one tunnel, they built two completely separate parallel tunnels. Every few meters, they constructed these cross passages connecting them, along with huge dedicated ventilation shafts. Think of it like a giant pressure release valve. This design gave those massive shockwaves a place to safely escape and dissipate, saving the entire $12.5 billion project from complete disaster. Section 6, the true cost of this marvel. As we wrap up this explainer, it's really important to step back and take in the colossal physical scale of what they achieved here, but also to reflect on the ultimate human cost. Over those 17 years, the amount of rock pulled out of that mountain was just staggering. 30 million tons, or 3 crore tons of rubble. To put that into perspective, if you piled it all up, you could literally build 5 Great Pyramids of Giza. But in classic Swiss fashion, they didn't just dump it somewhere. They repurposed all that rubble, using it to create beautiful, artificial islands out in Lake Lucerne. But you know, mountains always exact a toll. Throughout the construction, amidst the crushing rocks, the boiling heat, and the perilous conditions, 9 workers lost their lives. Today, there's a memorial standing at the entrance of the tunnel. It's a solemn, quiet tribute to those 9 heroes who ventured into the dark and never came back out, reminding everyone who passes through of the true price of this engineering marvel. The Gotthard Base Tunnel is so much more than just a faster train route. It is a 57-kilometer monument to sheer willpower. It's about looking at an impossible, immovable object and just refusing to back down. So, as we conclude this explainer, I really want to leave you with this thought. When we are faced with the absolute extremes of nature, armed with nothing but mathematics, machinery, and unimaginably brave people, is there truly any limit to the human spirit? Think about that for a bit. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.